Let's do this. We want to make a path for Alabama to go to the Final Four. We don't have to predict everything on here, but if Alabama is to make the Final Four, what has to happen at this top of the region? So I'll zoom back in on that. What has to happen? Not necessarily like you don't have to just say, well, this team needs to win, this team needs to lose. Talk about like who you like, what you your prediction could be, what also like what players need to step up, what needs to happen in these certain matchups. Cole, I'll start with you with the Hofstra game. What does Alabama have to do in that game to get to the round of 32?
I think they need to limit the amount of threes Hofstra can make. I think we need to, like Ryan mentioned earlier, I think we need to drag them into our game. We need to make it a fast-paced game. I think the best way to do that is get up by a lot. If you get up by 10, 12 points at some point, Hofstra is going to feel like they need to play fast to keep up. I think that's when we can really put our foot on the gas. So I think that to me is the biggest thing, and then limiting their 3-point shooting opportunities I think is going to be big as well.
If Alabama is to beat Hofstra, we go to the second round, whether it be Texas Tech or Akron. We're gonna assume that it's Texas Tech. When we play Texas Tech, Ryan, what has to happen in that game? You mentioned Aiden Sherrill being a key piece in our guards, having to do well in pick and roll, but is there any? You said all the guards in particular. How important is Latrell Wrightsell in this tournament, as he's gotten a little bit cooled off in the last two games?
So, a little backstory here on Latrell Wrightsell. I heard Ryan Pannone at the coaches clinic a few years ago. It was coming off the Final Four appearance. He said Latrell Wrightsell was the most important player in the country. He didn't say he was the best. He said he was the most important. And then I think, like, as time went on and Latrell's been in the program a little bit longer, when you watch the games, like the games he plays well, it feels like Alabama's a completely different level team than they are when he plays poorly or when he's hurt. To get him going, I would love to see him get going against Hofstra and be able to carry that over into the tournament. Tempo against Texas Tech is huge as well, and I love the way Latrell plays. He's willing to shoot it in transition. I think if we could get him going in the Hofstra game, they could carry over to Texas Tech, and I would love our chances there. All of our guards in that game would have to dictate tempo and pace and really turn it up against Texas Tech. And if we were able to do that, I would love our chances.
Okay, so in this scenario, Alabama gets to the Sweet 16, and we're likely going to see Michigan. If there were not to see Michigan, obviously I'd assume it's the winner of Georgia-St. Louis. I think if Georgia's going to get as hot as they did against Alabama, that's the only reason I could see them getting past Michigan. But we'll assume Michigan gets to the Sweet 16, and they have one of the best teams in the country. They're a 1 seed for a reason. They have one of the best players, Yaxel Lindenborg, who was at UAB last year and was – I don't know if Alabama actually targeted him in the transfer portal, but I like to think they did. And he went to Michigan, and they've been one of the best teams in the country. But Michigan, however, has been hampered by injuries. One of their best guards off the bench, Carr, is out with a torn ACL, and it's having to ask Elliot Cadeau to do a lot. And we saw what happened earlier today against Purdue. Braden Smith worked circles around that defense and was able to get any passes he wanted, any shots that he wanted. What is going to be – we'll ask everybody here, and I'll go first. I'm going to ask what is going to have to be the key to beating Michigan, beating this juggernaut. Now, 2 years ago, Alabama played a 1 seed in the Sweet 16. It was North Carolina. That's a different animal than this Michigan team. I think this Michigan team is better than that North Carolina team was. But North Carolina was good because they had R.J. Davis was the ACC Player of the Year, and they had Armando Bacot, which was a great big. And Michigan has a multitude of other great players. But they have a good guard. They have Cadeau, and they have a great player in Yaxel Lindenborg. But it's going to have to be a thing where our bigs are going to have to show up in the game. I'm not asking to out-rebound Michigan, not asking for Aiden Sherrill to outscore Yaxel Lindenborg. But I was impressed in that game with Pringle. Pringle was aggressive, and he was also aggressive in the Clemson game. But Grant Nelson had his coming out party against North Carolina. In a game like in this game, are we expecting someone to have a breakout game we weren't expecting? Because Grant Nelson at the time wasn't on his A game. We were expecting him to be the best player for Alabama that year. It ends up being Mark Sears, and then he just against North Carolina bursts for like once in a lifetime performance to send Alabama to its second ever Elite Eight, and now our third ever Elite Eight happened last year. But our bigs are going to have to step up. Aiden Sherrill is going to have a game where he's getting to the foul line a lot, putting Yaxel in maybe foul trouble or putting their 7-footer in foul trouble. I think that's going to be the key to beating Michigan is our bigs are going to have to show up. Cole, I'll start next with you. In a game against Michigan, what is going to have to happen for it to work for Alabama?
Sure. Yeah, I think you mentioned it. The bigs, especially defensively, I think are going to be huge. I think against Michigan, if that is the matchup in the Sweet 16, I think we're going to have to shoot well. We have to make threes. I don't really see a way for us to beat Michigan unless we're able to shoot from the outside because their interior defense is so good. It's going to be very hard for us to get consistent shots at the rim against those guys like Mara and Lindeborg inside that are so good defensively. So I think we're going to have to make our money from the 3-point line, and we're going to, like you said, we're going to have to limit how dominant they are inside to have a chance to beat Michigan.
What is your key to the game, Ryan? If it's a hypothetical Michigan matchup,
I think Cole knocked it out of the park right there. They are a huge roster, like multiple 6'9" guys. I think Mara is 7'3", right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. I mean, they're massive. We're going to have to battle, really be able to guard instead of foul trouble because I don't really trust Noah Williamson to play in that game. We're going to need Terrell to play 40 minutes, 38 minutes. We're going to need him to play a lot. So I think just our bigs having good games. Maybe try to catch them, play small some, get the pace flying so fast that Mara can't be on the floor. But it's a huge ask. I mean, I think Michigan's really good. Obviously, you don't get to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament if you're bad, at least not to my recollection. I would say our bigs, and then once again tempo. I know it feels like we keep talking about that, but when you're talking about Alabama basketball in the Nate Oates era, tempo has kind of been the name of the game.
We'll go into a potential Elite Eight matchup. So we look at that bottom half of the bracket. Alabama's already played Tennessee. I guess we can do Iowa State first since they are the 2 seed and would be the favorite to win at the bottom here. Iowa State's got 3 great players that average above 13 points per game. Joshua Jefferson is probably known as their best player. He's a 6'9" forward. But their 2 top scorers are both forwards, and they both shoot it pretty well from the 3-point line. Not that they shoot it a ton, but they do shoot it well. In the Elite Eight game for Alabama 2 years ago, it was Mark Sears hitting 7 or 8 straight 3-pointers, not missing at all, and Alabama getting a 13-point comeback from. They were down 13 early in the first and were able to take the lead before halftime and then never gave it up after that. If this is an Elite Eight game, if Alabama makes it that far, would this be LeBaron Philon's legacy game? Would this be the game where he full takes over? But also just in the tournament in general, how do you see LeBaron Philon doing in this tournament, Cole, and how important could he be in a potential Elite Eight matchup?
Yeah, I mean he's our best player, so I think he's going to be super important. I think he needs to hit threes. We've seen what happens when our best player's gone cold in the past with I believe it was 2022, the Brandon Miller year, where Brandon Miller struggled and we went out earlier than we expected. And we've seen what happens when our best players catch fire, like Mark Sears in that Elite Eight game, like you mentioned, Thomas. So having one guy that you feel like you can always go to get a bucket is huge in this tournament, especially. I've mentioned it a lot, but especially a guard that you feel like can go get you a bucket. So LeBaron's going to be massive.
I just realized one of Iowa State's their leading scorer, Momcilovic, I think that's how you say his name, shoots almost 50% from 3. And it's not like he shot – I miscorrect myself. I said he didn't shoot a lot of threes. I'm a liar. He shot over 250 3-point attempts, and he's almost 50% from 3. Momcilovic, yeah. I am sorry I disrespected your good name. You are a baller. When you have a guy like that going up against, that's kind of crazy. You got to match. You almost feel like you have to match them. So, like Ryan, you talked about Latrell Wrightsell. What about Aiden Holloway in the Elite Eight? How important would he be in a game like that?
This could be a game. If it happened to be Iowa State, this could be a game that's huge for him. They don't have a ton of size, and I mean Aiden Holloway's not a very big player, so you could roll him out there and trust him in a game like that. He's shot it well for us almost all year. If you ask me any shooter on the team that I would trust, it would be Aiden Holloway the most. So, I mean, a game like this against Iowa State, I think could be huge for him. We could do a lot of stuff to get him open once again, because they're not a very big team. Like we talked about how big Michigan was, Iowa State, not at all close to that. So I would love our guards to play well in that one. And I think it's a good matchup for them.
Yeah. One quick thing I want to mention on Iowa State before we move on, and it has to do with Momcilovic, like you mentioned, Thomas. Probably the best shooter in the country from what I've seen. I think he's incredible, but he is a very big defensive liability, and that could be something our guards could take advantage of in a potential Elite Eight matchup with Iowa State.
Cole, I'll just ask you, we'll go over a few more teams and then we'll actually pick the Midwest region. But for this Final Four video, we'll just talk about this. What about Kentucky? What if Kentucky runs the table to the Elite Eight? How are they? I'm not going to ask you to say like how we're not breaking down why Kentucky's doing good, but like if Kentucky's that far, Alabama's already played Kentucky, played them very early in the year. But that was when Kentucky was trying to figure out their best two players were not playing and they didn't really know how to figure it out. But say they figure it out, it's probably Otega Owe having an insane tournament. What does Alabama have to do if it is Kentucky to slow them down?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Kentucky because this bottom half of the region to me seems like it could be a bit of a chaos region. There's a lot of higher seeds here that I think could go on a decent run. Kentucky chief among them, but I also like SMU a lot. I like Santa Clara. I think could get hot and be pretty good. And these are two high seeds that I think are a little bit vulnerable in Iowa State and Virginia. For Kentucky specifically, I like that matchup probably better than I do against Iowa State or Virginia. Nate Oates has done very well against Kentucky and in particular Mark Pope over the last couple of years. It's another team that they have some shooters. Like you mentioned, the team's completely different from when we beat them earlier in the season. They don't have Lowe anymore. They don't have Quaintance anymore. But overall, I would like that matchup a little bit better just because we have the familiarity with most of their players. And overall, we've done a pretty good job against Mark Pope at Kentucky.
Virginia is one I want to talk about. They looked pretty good in the ACC tournament. I was honestly thinking that potentially Alabama could be a 4 and Virginia be a 5, but no, Virginia's a 3. And you got to give them credit where credit's due. They looked pretty good against Duke. Duke has had their injuries, but Virginia did look legit against Duke. They got 3 scorers that average above 10 points per game, and they multiple guys that are shooting above 35% from 3. DeRitter is probably their best player, just a freshman, averaging 15.5 points per game, shooting 34% from 3. They got one guy shooting 43%. They have Malik Thomas, not Arkansas's Malik Thomas, is another Malik Thomas, is also averaging 12.5 points per game. They've almost shot 1,000 3-point attempts this year. What about Virginia? I'll swing it to whoever wants to talk about Virginia. What's the potential? I feel like honestly, they have a good path to the Elite Eight. I think a Virginia-Tennessee matchup in the second round would be awesome to watch. But if Virginia gets it that far, what does Alabama have to do to get by Virginia? I'll start with you, Cole.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Virginia's got some talented guys. This is another matchup I like pretty well for Alabama, to be honest with you, because watching Virginia in this ACC tournament, I didn't really think they had a lot of really good athletes. And I think Alabama, especially at the guard position, could really out-athlete Virginia in a potential Elite Eight game. That being said, I think they have that edge on size. You mentioned Ugano Yinso, I believe, who's at one point was an Alabama target. He was huge in the ACC tournament. He's a really, really good player inside. They also have a freshman named Grunlow that's really, really solid inside, top 10 in the country. They actually have 2 guys top 10 in the country in block percentage. So that would be another potential problem for Alabama in terms of like driving to the rim, trying to get shots at the goal. But overall, I kind of like that matchup for Alabama, especially in terms of our guards. I think our guards could really dominate that matchup.
Anything you have to add, Ryan, for Virginia?
Virginia's such a weird team for me. Like the record tells you that they're supposed to be great. And you look at the schedule and it's like, well, they lost to Butler and they lost to Virginia Tech, 2 teams that I don't think are very good. I would love our matchup with Virginia. I think our guards could kind of pick on theirs. Cole said that. And I reiterate the point. Like I'd love to play Virginia in the Elite Eight with a chance to go to the Final Four. I'd love that matchup.
Last one we'll talk about is Tennessee. Tennessee is the only, I think, other option here. Alabama lost to Tennessee at home. They beat them on the road when Nate Ament went out. Nate Ament looks to be healthy. I think that would be the potential difference maker of Alabama is to play Tennessee again. LeBaron Philon really took over that game in Knoxville, kind of put the ball in his hands. We've done that multiple times this year against St. John's, Illinois, Oklahoma, Clemson. You can just name multiple games where it was close, and you see the difference was we just let LeBaron Philon do what he needs to do. So if Tennessee's the matchup, I think it's probably just going to come down to that. How hard is Tennessee playing defense? Are fouls going to be called appropriately? And I feel like in the tournament they get called. Sometimes some things get looked away, but I feel like sometimes in the tournament they're a little touchy on the foul calls.